No role plays, just real. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader.
We've never really, as a workforce, spent a lot of time on making sure we're developing good leaders.
We'll be able to share stories, experience, mistakes, failures, successes.
This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, we are continuing our discussion on leadership theories based on the Monday.com article you sent me almost 2 months ago now. This is episode 6 of 8 in our series. Go back and listen to the first 5 if you haven't, or when this episode's over. I think we've had some really great conversations around the first 5 leadership theories that we've discussed. On today's episode, we're talking about the contingency theory of leadership, developed by Fred Fiedler, almost 70 years ago now. And contingency theory, there's some cool stuff here. Like, I think as we've gone on, one of the trends I've seen on the different theories of leadership is kind of an overarching acceptance of gray area. Meaning, as we've moved from week to week to week, it seems like it's gone from like a very black and white world, like this is how it is, to, well, there's some nuance here, and different people are different ways and different things, and so I kind of like, as we're moving through this, 'cause I think I function better in the gray than someone telling me that the things are very black and white. With contingency theory, in general, it basically acknowledges that the last 2 theories we discussed, of the transformational leader and the transactional leader, it acknowledges that they both exist. And it basically says that, you have to have the right person in there for the job, and that people can't really change, right? They can't go from being a transactional leader to a transformational leader, or vice versa, which, as a person who considers myself more of a transformational leader, I can tell you flat out, I have a very difficult time being a transactional leader, and I know a lot of transactional leaders who have a very hard time being transformational leaders. So that part of it actually makes sense. But what were your thoughts about this?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think this is the theory that aligns most with what we've talked about before, which is like the memes, like the manager versus the leader thing. And I think a lot of times the manager thing is about tasks. Like some tasks need to be managed, and in some industries and some spaces, you need somebody who is really good at managing tasks and making sure there's consistency and making sure that things get done a very specific way. And then there's the type of leader that is around relationship building,
right?
And they make you feel inspired. Maybe they have a better connection with you. But you and I both know, and many times those leaders aren't the best at getting tasks done the most efficient or the most effectively sometimes, because they're spending time in the personal space and in the emotional EQ space, versus somebody who is not spending the time doing much of that, yet they're very efficient. And over time, I think teams can learn to respect that and appreciate that, especially when everybody is attempting to get the task done as efficiently as possible.
Right. I mean, on the one hand, it speaks very eloquently to the fact that if you have a multi-person leadership team, so if we're talking about spaces in the retail or service industry, there's going to be a place where eventually the buck stops somewhere, right? There's going to be the head person, the general manager, or the leader, whoever that is. But if you have a leadership team, I think it's really, really important that if you are the whoever the person is where the buck stops, if you lead leaders, that you have a mix of these types of people on your team, because you will have a lot of people who tend to gravitate towards one style versus the other. And it doesn't mean that they can be absolutely abysmal at the other. Like, you have to be able to at least care about people. Like I said in one of our first episodes ever, you have to like people if you want to be a leader of people. You could be the most transactional leader out there and just be really poor in the EQ space, but you still have to like people in general. It just, maybe you're just less comfortable in that space. And people can see through that. In fact, I think a lot of transactional leaders, they have a really difficult time faking the relationship. Yeah. And so the ones that don't try almost garner a bit of respect from their people. Like, well, at least this person's not trying to blow smoke up me, like they're being who they are. Yeah, they're not great at building relationships. I'm not going to go sit and have a beer with this person, but I can respect that they are who they are and they're not trying to be somebody different. And so let's just get this work done together that we're supposed to get done. Fiedler's theory of contingency leadership, the thing that I kind of like about this is that he basically says that there's no way to get the highest level of performance by the leader trying to adapt to the situation. That you basically have to switch out the leader. That if you have a situation, certain situations call for leaders that are very task-oriented, and certain situations call for leaders that are very relationship-oriented, and you are not going to get a high level of performance if you don't pick the right leader. You can't say, oh, you're the leader, so you have to be in the situation. Now adapt yourself to fit this situation. He says that part is really not possible.
Yeah, and I think like if you think about it by industry or different parts of businesses, so like in the retail services space, you tend to have people or things that happen from a merchandising standpoint or like an overnight, right? And so if you have to have somebody there that's leading tasks, you tend to have the leader who's good at that element of task oriented. Like they're spending the time with the team, making sure tasks are getting accomplished on time and efficiently, and not just hanging out and talking up a storm and taking forever to get things done. I think in other organizations, they tend to be in like the operations element or the P&L management element or the finance element. They tend to be in parts of the business where it's about the task at hand. And while they can sometimes come across as, like to your point, like not the most approachable or not the most likable, I think over time, if they do like people, but they are just that way, people appreciate them because they're like, at least they're fair, right? at least they're like they're like that with everybody. They're like that with everything. So I don't take it personal. That's just what they do. And so I think of like if I was to go and be asked to oversee a really heavy task oriented type of situation, probably not the best choice.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to talk, I'm going to crack jokes, we're going to have some fun. I'm going to play music, like I'm going to do all these things that naturally kind of like bring some energy and excitement and fun to it, but that's probably going to slow us down. In those spaces. So I think you have to be conscious of that. And again, like replacing the leader for what is needed doesn't mean like firing the leader. It just means like finding the right leader for what's needed in those spaces.
Yeah, I'm thinking to myself, where were leadership podcasts when I was 22, like 20 years ago? Because I actually remember volunteering to do a kind of an overnight reset at a retail organization that I was with a long time ago, because the person who would normally do it was out. They were sick and they weren't going to be able to be there, and I volunteered to do it. And I remember thinking in my head, this is amazing. Think about all the connections I can make with my people when there are no customers around because it's overnight. And I'm looking at this as a very good thing. And in my head, what I should be looking at is if I had this contingency theory of leadership in front of me, I'd be thinking, no, this means that you are going to derail what the job is supposed to be that night, which I did. And at the end of it, I'm going to walk out of there thinking, look at all I got accomplished. And the people that I was leading are going to walk out of there thinking, oh my gosh, I would have been out here 2 hours ago if I wasn't stopping to have conversations with Chris all night. And so, yeah, no, this makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and I think it's something, like you said earlier in the show, like understanding your teams and the balance of the teams and having people that are good in all these spaces. And then I think as a leader of leaders, not like spending all this time trying to make people and leaders something that they're not.
Right.
And like there's definitely things that you can do to help leaders that may be really good at this, but then may struggle with some of the relational elements and relationship elements, and taking time with them to like work through how do you build, relationships over time, and how do you make sure that, you're leading with who you are, and having a space where, especially if you're a leader and you're responsible for people's development, like it's on you as the leader. Like you have to adjust for what they need. Like that's actually in my mind the expectation. So sometimes when I hear leaders that are just like, oh, well, yeah, I'm just not a really good connector, and I'm just like, that's not good.
Yeah.
I get that maybe you go towards tasks versus like naturally building relationships. I'm not asking you to make best friends, but I am saying you have to create a moment of connection with your people that you can understand what they need from you, and not just implement how you like things done, because your people are not a task.
Right.
And so like those are things that, again, it's not about changing what the strength is they bring to the team or how they see the work that needs to get done, but it is making them aware where that can be a hurdle or a career staller if you're not capable of knowing when to apply that skill set.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to post a link to an image in the podcast description so you can look at this if you want to. I don't want to go too deep into it without being able to have people see this image, but there is something that Fiedler talks about when it comes to when a leader is most effective, and I think it's kind of profound because it talks about where leaders shine or where they tend to shine. And Fiedler says basically that if your people trust you implicitly, and if it's very clear what needs to get done, that the task at hand, it's very clear and laid out, and they see you as having a lot of authority as a leader, then you can be a very task-oriented leader and get a lot done. But he says that a task-oriented leader actually performs better in those situations than a relationship-oriented leader. That if it's very clear what needs to be done, and there's a lot of trust from the team to the leader, and they perceive the leader as having a lot of authority, that a relationship-oriented leader will not generate the best performance. And that speaks very eloquently to what I experienced as the relationship-oriented leader who was much less efficient at getting the task done, because I was in my mind, I was thinking, how do I contribute here? And if none of that stuff is needed, because the trust is high, the authority level is high, the work is clear, what do I need to influence at all? What do I need to utilize my relationship building to influence? Well, nothing. So therefore, I'm trying to shoehorn myself in to figure out how I can contribute, and that actually ends up derailing it. Where I tend to shine as a leader, and other relationship-oriented leaders tend to shine, is when those things are kind of nuanced, when there's not a lot. Maybe it's not, we don't know what we're doing at all, but there's some questions to be answered around how to do a task. When the authority level of the leader is not necessarily completely there. And I've always said to myself, I have always found that it's easier for me to lead when I don't have a title. Because in my head, I'm thinking I'm utilizing whether or not people are following me and listening to what I have to say as a litmus test for whether or not they actually trust me. Because if I actually have the title, then I never know whether they're doing it because I have the title, or if they believe in what I'm saying. And that's a more difficult one for me. So this makes a lot of sense. And again, I'll post a link to the image in the podcast description, because I think it's worth looking at in terms of how a leader, or the type of leader that is most effective given the situation, because I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, well, and I think to your point, the question and the thought around authority is so important, because in the perfect world, having influence without authority, and as you're talking about, are you building people and networking with people and having relationships with people where they're following you because they choose to, and it's all simply based on that. That feels the purest as far as building great leadership relationships. The difference, though, and this is where I think people don't understand, is but by having the title and having the authority of a title, it now challenges some of those types of things, where it's not as easy as, I like Chris, therefore, even if Chris has a wild request, I'm going to go do it because he's cool and he can't tell me what to do. Well, the minute Chris now has a title and can tell you what to do, now that wild request doesn't feel so fun and easy anymore. And now it's he can't tell me that, or what, now that he's got the title, he thinks he has all this power. There's an element of leadership development that I think you don't get. It doesn't happen for you until you have the title, and until you have some of these authoritarian elements of relationships and redefinition and expectations, and you kind of have to work through what is that like to have good relationships, but also have the authority to, at the end of the day, say, well, because I said so. And it's just, that to me is not something I ever want to get to, but it happens from time to time. You have to say, well, if you two can agree, or this is the gray area of a strategy, or this is where we're not exactly sure what to do, well, then I'm going to make this decision, and it's going to be this. And it's because I have the authority to do it, and we're going to go down this route. And that can rub relationships, and that can create some of the tension moments. But I think you have to have those to really, kind of polish your leadership and understand when and how to go in between some of these spaces and some of the nuance.
Right. So I mean, I look at it this way: your title is just a tool, like anything else. It can be used for good or it can be used for bad. Right. So if I have the title of the leader, the buck stops with me, and I'm constantly wielding it as that you're going to do what I say because I'm the boss, that's not going to go very far. But if I don't have the tool to begin with, then I can't pull it out when it's absolutely needed, when something has to get done, and it's not the time for questions. It's not the time for whiteboarding it together and kumbayaing it, and something has to get done. Again, that's where I tend to have to reach inside myself to pull something out, is when I have authority, but I have a hard time kind of wielding it. I want to get people to come along because they want to, not because I have the title. And so I'll try to make it happen in another way. And then when eventually it moves to where I have to just say, we're just going to get this done now because I am the boss, then that can go over less well, almost like, you tried to make this happen. You weren't able to convince me, so now you're just going to tell me what to do. And a lot of leaders who don't really try that first way. But what they do is they create the relationships based on the predictability and the consistency and the trust that occurs every single day over the fact that you know from this person that they're very task oriented. You're not gonna.
The 1 minute hack.
Talk about it. They're gonna look at you with like glossed over eyes. But at the end of the day, they are very predictable as a leader. And you know how they're gonna react and what you can do to garner their favor versus what will make them mad. Those types of leaders can lead teams very, very effectively in a space where there's a lot of task-oriented things to get done.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1 minute hack. But first, a few words from our sponsors.
All right, for this episode's 1 minute hack, here's what I want you to do. If you're a leader of leaders, I want you to write down a list of the people that report to you who are other leaders of people. And I want you to think about the work that has to get done on your team, in your area, whatever you have to do, and kind of divide those people up in terms of which ones are kind of better at building relationships, which ones are better at, kind of task-oriented things. And do your best to kind of divide the labor up in ways that let those people shine wherever they can. If you are a leader yourself and you're trying to figure out what you need to be doing, where you can contribute, really think about the areas that you would shine best in based on what kind of leader you are, whether you're relationship-oriented or task-oriented, and try to insert yourself in the areas more where you can shine, where you can utilize those strengths. It doesn't mean you don't have to know how to do the other thing. A well-rounded leader, by definition, really has to be able to at least play in all of these spaces, so it cannot be a get-out-of-jail-free card to say, I'm not good at that, I'm not going to try. And it also can't be a way for you to allow your people to not be good at least creating connections in some way. But the more you can assign work to both yourself and to your people based on this contingency theory of that some people are much better at building relationships and some people are much better at getting tasks done, I think you're going to get the highest level of performance out of your team, and you're going to get people who are more engaged in their work.
Yeah, I think it's a great 1 minute hack. And again, a constant reminder of thinking about how we assess ourselves, how we assess the people that we work with, the leaders that we work with, and then making sure that we're putting people in spaces to do their best work and being knowledgeable of the types of theories that people subscribe to, whether they do it intentionally or not, is very helpful in putting them in opportunities that allow them to shine and do great work, and also provide you an opportunity to provide them with the development of the feedback to help them shape overall the type of leader they want to be.
Right. I also think this is a really great opportunity if you're a leader of people and a leader of leaders to really assess, have conversations with your people and ask them about the things that they like. I have found in my life things have happened this has happened several times where I'm good at something that I don't love. I'm good at something that I'm not passionate about. Don't mistake somebody being good at something as they must love doing this. There's absolutely a way to be really good at something that you don't love doing. And maybe you did love it at some point and you don't anymore. But if you can talk to your people and communicate with them, it's possible that whatever they love doing is not what they're really doing every day. And if you can help them get there, you'll get even higher levels of engagement.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership, a Spreaker Prime podcast. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And talk to you all next time.